How did I get into this kind of work? Okay, we have 7 hours now. We can cut directly, right? I got into this kind of work as a result of having some psychic experiences, basically. I ended up with making the mistake one day, one rainy Sunday afternoon in Scottsdale, Arizona, of going to the store and getting a Ouija board with a gal I was dating at the time. And the Ouija board just took off. It would answer all these questions. And she had a roommate. And the roommate, and when she combined her energy with the Ouija board, with the roommate, a female roommate, why, they didn't even have to touch the planchette. You know, they could have their hands about an inch above it, and it would fly all over the place. And it was saying things like, don't go out tonight. We had planned to go to a nightclub called Mr. Lucky's, which was there in nearby community. And don't go out, accident assured. And so what we did, of course, is sit around and wait for everything to, time to pass and have more experiences with the Ouija board. And pretty soon, Carol, the gal that I was dating at the time, she said, well, nobody calls me this except my husband. But she's getting all of these endearments over the Ouija board. I had no background whatsoever in any of this, so I thought, whoa, the husband's probably bit the dust. And so she started calling around to find out what had happened. She was in Scottsdale, Arizona. Her husband was in L.A. She had left him because he was dealing, and she felt, everything was going to fall apart. He was dealing drugs. And what she found is that he had been busted, and rather than be caught with the evidence, he just gulped everything down, blew his circuits, was now sitting in a dark room in a mental hospital, and he had somehow been able now to create a link and directly communicate. Now, how all this happened like it did, I was just... But as we continued to play with the Ouija board, and the girlfriend, my girlfriend, and her friend, her roommate, it just got more and more convoluted, and pretty soon the girlfriend tried to kill herself. I mean, literally went out and going to dive off the balcony from a 3-story apartment, and then she cut her wrist. And so she was so weird about being taken over by this guy, and he was literally, he could come in and possess her. And it wasn't classic possession. I had no idea what we were dealing with. And I went to a psychic who was down the street from my office. I had an art studio there in Scottsdale. Right down the street was a little office of this woman called Rose Figueroa. She was a psychic, and I'd been by her house a dozen times, and so I went to her house and I said, here's what I'm dealing with. And she explained it, and she said, get away from the girls, and you should separate them, because this energy, it'll pull you in, and you don't want to be there. But at the same time, the psychic gave me all these predictions. She said, well, this is going to happen in your life, and so's this, and you're going to get a book deal from Simon & Schuster, or some big publishing company. And I did get away from the girls. They would not, Carol wouldn't give it up. And so I had to, say, well, I'm not part of this anymore. I'm pulling away. And as a result, I didn't have her as a girlfriend anymore, but at the same time, it wasn't that tight anyway. But all of these predictions by the psychic took place. They all happened. And that really got my attention. And so I began to investigate metaphysics. I tried to prove it all wrong. I thought, this is ridiculous. This cannot be so. I was really skeptical of all this. And the more I learned about it, the more I realized how real it was. And the more experiences I began to have, until, in going back to see Rose, that psychic, she said, you are really going to write about this one day in a big way. It's going to be a lot of publicity around you. This is the way you will spend the rest of your life. And at the time, I was a very successful advertising designer. I thought, yeah, sure, come on. And yet, as time went by, as I wrote a book, the book created so much interest that I had to make a choice as to whether or not I was going to be involved in this work or not, basically. And I chose the work. And you are going to see this ball of energy emit from the tip of my finger, and you're going to watch it go out to the back of the room, and it's going to circle around. It's going to come back, and it's going to strike you gently on the forehead and drop you down into the deepest possible hypnotic sleep. In the art studio, I had an illustrator that I employed, and he kept saying, "Come on, Sutphen, let's take a hypnosis course." And it was a self-hypnosis class. And the guy who was teaching it said, if you take, I think it was a 6-week class, at the end of that time, I will regress you back into a past life. And so that was the carrot that he was hanging out. And thought, okay, maybe hypnosis would be cool anyway. And man, the minute I started studying that stuff, I just knew, you know, what it was about. I really understood hypnosis, how to use it, and then I trained more. I had the past life regression. The past life regression just blew me away. It was back to a place I really knew nothing about, called Copan, Honduras. And so I saw very vividly myself as a young boy running through the jungle. I saw all of these scenes in the town, the city rather, of Copan. At the time, Mayan empires, so we're talking a very long time ago. And they were so vivid, and I was awakened crying 2 or 3 times. The guy had to wake me up because I was so upset because the Spanish soldiers were coming through and they were tearing down all of the religious icons of the Mayan people. And so on the way home, I stopped at the city library. And I looked up Copan, Honduras. We didn't have the web then, you know, you just had the, you go to the library, and I did. And I had seen things such as the sun setting, and it was reflecting off the face of the main temple in the town square. So I knew basically that temple faced west. And sure enough, they had all these plot maps in books at the library. And the main temple in Copan did indeed face west. So as a result, I was now fascinated all the more. How could I know that about someplace I had never heard of? Consciously, to the best of my knowledge, I'd never heard of it. And now I was intrigued with the potential of regression. So I started to take more training, and as a result, I started to experiment with it.
Do you think like you had to sacrifice anything? Like, you know, you took a drastic path, a new way of working, you know, and you gave up a whole life of advertising.
I did. Yeah, I did. And I loved advertising. I thought I would do advertising all my life.
Do you think of it as a sacrifice, or was it just the right choice?
No, it was the right choice at the time, Martin. It really was. Now, I look back on that, I don't think of it as a sacrifice, any way, shape, or form. I loved doing it. I had a passion, you know, just literally a passion for it, and I couldn't find out enough. And so what I started doing was things that allowed me to be able to continue to investigate that passion, learn more. I started doing some seminars, and those were well attended because hardly anybody was doing any past life regression. And I'd studied enough and I'd experimented enough that I could do group past life regression very effectively, and people flocked to it. I wish there was that much interest today as there was back, you know, at that time, which is about 1974, 75. I find new ideas, new techniques, and I hope I always do, because that's what will, you know, that's what keeps you going, the passion.